Have you ever seen an alligator sunbathing with its mouth wide open? This may seem like a pretty strange behavior, but there are actually two very good reasons why alligators do this. Today we're going to talk about them. The first reason has to do with temperature regulation. Now, in order for us to maintain our body temperature, we sweat. And yes, alligators sweat too, but they don't have sweat glands all over their body like mammals. Well, even though their skin does absorb some oxygen, their mouths have special structures called buccal cones, which basically funnel water over their gills, allowing them to extract even more oxygen from their environment. Plus, their mouths have a lot more blood vessels near their gills than the skin does. So they can absorb oxygen way more efficiently through their mouths rather than through their skin. If you see someone else yawn, you're more likely to do it too. All of these behaviors help us understand how alligators adapt to their environments and survive in the wild. And this has been observed in alligators as well. However, there's one big difference. Contagious yawning in alligators is linked to dominance. So if an alligator sees another alligator yawning, it's more likely to yawn itself, but only if the other alligator is subordinate to it. Basically, it's a way of showing that they're the boss. You see, like most other reptiles, alligators are ectothermic, which means that they rely on external sources of heat to regulate their body temperature. American alligators tend to bask during the morning and late afternoon to early evening, whereas Chinese alligators only bask in the mornings. And African dwarf crocodiles, which are closely related to alligators, typically bask in the afternoons. Also, studies have shown that when there's more vegetation along the water's edge, alligators are less likely to open their mouths while sunbathing. This is probably because the vegetation provides some shade, meaning that the alligators have to work as hard to warm up, and therefore don't need as much oxygen. When it's cold, they'll bask on logs or sunbathe on the banks of rivers to warm up. And during these times, they need a lot of energy to keep their body processes going. In order to get that energy, they need to take in a lot of oxygen. So when alligators are sunbathing, having their mouths open allows them to take in way more oxygen than if their mouths were closed. In fact, studies have shown that some species of turtles, which are close relatives of alligators, can take in 3 times more oxygen when they're gaping than when they're not. In fact, their sweat glands are located only in their tongues. So in order for alligators to cool off, they basically have to stick their tongues out. But since they're reptiles, they can't just stick their tongues out like we do when we get hot. If they did that, they would lose too much water and end up dehydrating themselves. Instead, what they do is open their mouths really wide, almost like they're yawning, and then close their eyes. By doing this, they expose the roof of their mouths, which is lined with tiny blood vessels, to the air. And since the blood is moving through those vessels from the heart, it picks up the heat from the blood and transfers it to the air, thus cooling the blood down. Once the blood reaches the tongue, it releases the heat from its vessels and makes the whole process of sweating a lot more efficient. But there's another important benefit to this gaping yawn behavior, and that has to do with getting more oxygen into their bodies. Now, you might be wondering, why don't alligators just breathe through their skin like salamanders do? Depending on the species of alligator, as well as where they live, they may engage in gaping at different times of the day. And finally, one last interesting thing about gaping. In most animals, the act of yawning is contagious. So next time you see an alligator sunbathing with its mouth open, just remember that it's either trying to cool off or get some extra oxygen or assert dominance.